Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of House and Home. We're super excited to have you with us tonight. There's a lot of places you could be tonight, and we appreciate you deciding to spend some time with us. So we're in session 3 of this series we're calling House Corporation Pain Points. And if this is your first time with us, welcome. If it's your third or fourth time with us, welcome back. So we are thrilled to have you with us tonight. For those of you I haven't had a chance to meet, my name is Scott Fussell. I'm the Director of Education for CSL Management. I'm a Beta Theta Pi from Middle Tennessee State, where I had an absolutely life-changing fraternity experience, and continue to have that same kind of life-changing experience today, which is why I continue to do what I do and why I'm so grateful that you guys are all here doing the same thing. Uh, by showing up tonight, and again, there's a lot of places you could spend your Thursday night, and by showing up tonight, that just reveals to us that you care deeply about your organization, you care deeply about the members who call your chapter houses home, and you care deeply about this experience. So for you investing your time, talent, and treasure into this experience to help young people have a life-changing experience, we need you to know we are super, super grateful. So tonight is, like I mentioned earlier, is session 3 of this series we're calling House Corporation Pain Points. And this is where we're wrapping up with a really wonderful town hall that we've got planned for you. This whole series has been about confirming some of the things that you may be challenged by, validating some of the concerns that you have, but really the most important thing is really trying to connect you with new ideas, with new ways of thinking, and hopefully with a few new people that you can lean on for support. So tonight is one of those perfect opportunities to connect you with some industry experts that might help you think about things a little bit differently. And we think there's going to be a ton of takeaways tonight. So we're super excited to have a conversation really wrapped around supply chain, financial, and the construction side of the fraternity sorority community right now. It's been a challenging year, and those 3 topics are top of mind for everybody, it seems like. So as I've mentioned a time or two, this is going to be a panel discussion. And Woody, who I'll introduce in just a second, is going to be facilitating most of the discussion. But we also want you to hop into the chat and drop your questions there. So I will be monitoring the chat, and I'll be jumping in from time to time to interject the questions that I'm reading in the chat. So if you have a question for one of our panelists, please drop it there. Again, I'll be jumping in there. I'll be in there the whole conversation, and be jumping in from time to time, and we'll try to field as many of those questions as we can get to. So as usual, Woody Ratterman is alongside tonight. He's our managing partner here at CSL, also a chapter brother of mine at Middle Tennessee State, and just really grateful for all Woody does, and really thankful that he was able to carve out some time tonight. So Woody, thanks for making time. Thanks for being with us, and appreciate you being here with us to help facilitate a really important conversation. And would love to turn it over to you now and introduce our panel and kick off the conversation. Take it away, Woody.
Thanks, Scott. Good evening, everyone. It's good to be with you once again as we wrap up this 3-part series. I'm very excited tonight, and I'm very eager to hear from our panelists myself, just knowing what we're navigating for our clients right now as we're all looking toward the summer and CapEx and summer projects, and then hopefully into what will be a little bit more business as usual fall as we try to continue to get on the other side of this pandemic. So before we get started, let me introduce our panelists. And we really were thinking through those who are out there in the trenches day in and day out with us in our industry and do a lot of great things for the fraternity and sorority market. And our first person that we thought of, especially when it comes to when we look about taking on the challenges that we have, they normally require money. And so we certainly have great friends in the fundraising world like Pennington and several others, but sometimes we need to go out and hit the financial markets. And we wanted to bring Jen Henson to the table with Residential Capital Corp. She is by far the leading person in our industry in terms of going out and finding funds for our clients to the tune of $50+ million in the last couple of years alone, and just been around this business. I think, I don't want to say the years, give her age away, but well over 40 years she's been doing this. So we're very excited to have Jen here, and we appreciate you participating. We also wanted to go out onto the construct. Well, go ahead, Jen. I'm sorry. I should have said, give you a second to say hello.
I just want to say thank you. Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
absolutely.
Hello.
Yep. Thanks for being here. We also wanted to get on the construction front of things, knowing, again, if you've listened to many of our education sessions and webinars over the years, or been to any of our speaking engagements, if you've heard time and time again, we have an aging infrastructure of our houses, with many of them, more than well over 70% of them, built before 1980. But we've also seen in the last 10 or 15 years some extraordinary growth in the fraternity and sorority market in terms of the number of members we've had and new construction, Greek villages at campuses, and all kinds of major work going on. And one part of the country where it's certainly been most significant, at least from our vantage point, has been in the Southeast. And we've had a tremendous partner over the years that's done a lot of work in the Southeast in the construction industry with War Construction. That's Hugh Mallette. So Hugh, we appreciate you being here tonight.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
And then last but not certainly least, of course, if it was just Brian, I'd probably be giving you more of a hard time. But since he's brought some friends with him, I want to be nice to him tonight. But longtime industry partner and a friend of ours as well is Brian Heider with Culinary Consultants. And we're very grateful he's brought a couple of his friends from US Foods. They are certainly one of the leaders for our industry as it relates to group purchasing, supply chain, and knowing that if we think about this time last year, that's where all of our focus was really. We're all thinking about paper products. We're all thinking about PPE. We're all thinking about all these things that we're going to have to bring to our house: hand sanitizer, automatic dispensers, all these different elements. And we were certainly leaning very much on our supply chain partner similar to Culinary Consultants. So Brian is the president for that and invited Tony Forchetti to come and join us as the director of merchandising with US Foods. So gentlemen, thank you very much for being here tonight.
Pleasure.
So with that, Tony, can you do a sound check for us? Because you're going to be first up. You being supply chain, I got you first up on our questions today. Let's see if we can get him unmuted. Can you unmute all again, Scott?
Yep.
Okay, there we go. Is that
there
working?
We go. And we're working.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Well, I appreciate being the leader. Thanks for digging up that photo there. That's always nice to see what's going on. A big shout out to all of you. I will say on behalf of parents of students, thank you for watching out for them and making their time on campus as fruitful as possible. I have a junior fraternity son, unfortunately not one of your all facilities here, but you and folks like you take care of him all day long, and I thank you very much. So
we appreciate that. Well, what we'd like to do is I'm going to start off the question with you, if that's okay, and then I'm going to piggyback back to you, Hugh, thinking from a construction standpoint. But obviously, a big sort of was on, as I said earlier, on everyone's mind going into last fall was supply chain disruptions, where we were going to get PPE, hand sanitizer, paper products, etc. And as we look to the fall, certainly right now there is a significant disruption in supply chain that we're seeing anyway on the construction front that I'll ask you to elaborate on here in a second. But as you look at US Foods, as you look at your supply chain on the normal items that we're always packing our houses with, paper products, food, cleaning supplies, hand sanitizer, even if that's still something that we need to be concerned about. Are there anything that we need to be mindful of as we're looking in to the fall? For instance, I just had an email this morning from one of our national partners asking, hey, I heard paper products were going to go up by 30, 40% in the next 3 to 6 weeks due to all this disruption in the wood side of the commodity exchange. So we would love to get your crystal ball, if you will, or insight as it relates to supply chain and how we need to be prepared for the fall.
Yeah, so we've absolutely all lived through a really tough last 12 months for sure, and the industry is recovering a bit, but there are still going to be some trouble spots. And I'll give you some global themes first off. So I would say transportation, right? Freight is going to be an issue across the board, and freight really touches all three legs of the supply chain when we talk together on the food side, right? You got the commodity processors that are moving products into food manufacturers, then you've got the food manufacturers that are moving finished goods back out to we as distributors, and then U.S. Foods as a distributor moving those products out to your facilities, right, for the end service. And freight is a challenge for all those legs. Driver shortages, it's just very difficult. So freight is a cost pressure that's going to be out there and a certain disruptor from time to time. Along with that is labor. It's probably no secret to you all who have gone out to try to hire for particular positions. The labor market is pretty tight. With folks still a little unsettled post-COVID, you've got things like the stimulus payments that are out there. It's oftentimes more fruitful for folks to stay home than it is to go work. And it's difficult to fill some of those positions. So we certainly feel that a bit at U.S. Foods in some of our distribution centers, our product selectors and things like that. And we're working very hard to recruit and retain and incent people, right, at that level. But food manufacturers are also feeling the brunt of some of those challenges. So it's creating some capacity issues on the food manufacturer side. Certainly the increased cost of labor, which is going to find its way into products at some point down the road. And manufacturers have also lived through an uncertain time. And so what you're seeing them do is rationalize a lot of the products that they make available in the marketplace. And so what's happening there is some of those products we're used to having available are no longer available in the kinds of quantities that they used to be. And so that creates some challenges. So, overall food inflation is expected to be in the same historical band that it's been over time, maybe a tick or two higher. I think if you look at the USDA latest forecast, they're talking about 2.5% to 3.5% food inflation, which again is about 0.5% to 1% higher than what we've seen historically. But what you're going to find are there are going to be certain areas and certain commodities where that pressure is much more dramatic. You mentioned some things like the non-food items, certainly paper products, plastic products, because of the availability of resin. Those are probably going to see a little bit more aggressive price increases than that traditional 2.5% to 3.5%. Proteins, you're probably going to see some pressure on protein markets across the board. Beef has been quite choppy and quite expensive, but you're going to see poultry, which is a very cost-effective protein that we all find our way into our menus. Poultry pricing is going to be going up. So, look for that in levels that we haven't seen before.
Would you, just a couple of follow-up questions to that, Tony. If I'm a house corporation, I'm working on my budget and I'm looking at those two line items, supplies and food. If we're not partnering with a kitchen management company, we're actually handling the food ourselves. If I had those two line items in my budget, do I increase it 5% for this starting in August, 10%? What kind of, you're mentioning 3.5%, 4% maybe in some of those areas. Is 5% a good number from what we paid last year as a safe figure to increase those numbers by?
Yeah, I say again, I think the 2.5% to 3.5% forecast or recommendation that the USDA has out there is a good one. Okay. Again, when you're talking about partners like Brian and what he does on behalf of you back through his partner at Vizient and then through US Foods, we're able to mitigate some of those increases a bit by the strength of the contracts that are out there. Certainly US Foods, we're a $25 billion player in the marketplace. So we have some purchasing power and leverage with manufacturers that can help mitigate some of those increases. The Vizient contract portfolio really helps to mitigate those increases as well. So even though the marketplace may see increases, on the high end of that scale, right? The Vizient contracts and the work that Brian and team do on your behalf should help buy you a little bit of relief.
Okay. And I would say just two other follow-ups to your statement before I swing it to Hugh for a second. If we're having, I would say on the freight side, or at least what we're seeing in our orders and when we're working with our vendor partners on some of the projects and supplies, freight's not only from a cost standpoint, but we need to be allowing more time. Is that a fair statement? If we need something, if traditionally something shows up in 2 or 3 days, we may need to allow a week, or if it's, lead time just from shipping, we've seen some things taking longer from a freight side of the equation as well. Is that a fair statement, or are you not seeing that as much?
Yeah, I think most of that is probably seen on our side, right? So when we bring inventory inbound to our distribution centers, we're having to do things like increase our lead times from manufacturers and increase our safety stock and inventory so that we can be more sure that we have the items available when we send them out to the end customer and to the houses. I think from US Foods out to the houses perspective, what we would ask is, a couple things. One is just flexibility, because we may need to adjust delivery days to mitigate some of the challenges we have with drivers and routes. So if you could be flexible on your delivery days, that's helpful. Always a dialogue with your account executive about any changes you expect to see in the menus, your student count, anything, right? So we can get out ahead of some of those things and make sure we have the inventory on hand. Again, that allows us to plan things through the supply chain. So just a little bit more dialogue, a little more collaboration together, and a little bit of flexibility about menu items can help us ride through this a bit better.
Perfect. And last question. Go ahead, Scott.
Sorry, Woody. No, I just had a quick question here popped up on the chat in regards to something that Tony mentioned a minute ago in regards to paper. Charles want to know if we should be buying ahead on paper products in 2022.
Well, I guess I would answer it this way. One of the other strategies you can all have is maybe on some of those key items, that if you could increase your storage stock levels, your part levels at the unit, right, at the house, that could help ride out some of the choppiness of the inventory availability throughout the supply chain. I would caution buying too far out, again, on different kinds of products, only because you run into then storage issues and things like that, right? And the space is limited for the most part in most kitchens. When I've been through, certainly my fraternity house, which is many, many years ago, but my son's house, I know that space is limited. So you can only buy out so far before that starts to create some other operational challenges for you, which might mitigate any of the cost savings you might have on paper. So I don't know. I'm not sure there's a magic answer there, but I would say safety stock on your side to make sure you have a little bit more of the critical items. And then again, keep some dialogue with the account executives going back, and they can then call on some of our category experts to maybe clue you all in on some things that might become more of a challenge down the road.
Yeah, and that leads beautifully in the question I was going to ask, because I know this time last year, Brian and I were having some pretty lengthy conversations, and he participated in one of our town halls on the front end, and we were talking through, and you mentioned there were some products that are harder to find or being limited by manufacturers right now. And just thinking, Tony, in a fraternity and sorority environment, again, paper products are always a big element: napkins, toilet paper, paper towels, cleaning supplies, disinfectant wipes, hand sanitizer, products in that arena, if you will, as you think about, or even on some of the food elements. Is there anything that should be aware of that is on the scarce side that we would need to be mindful of right now and trying to go out and procure now versus waiting the normal sequencing of events with our ordering, or that you can think of?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the answer is things on the supply side, the non-food side. I think manufacturers have done a pretty good job catching up on demand, right? So that pandemic hit, right? We all did it, right? Run to the grocery store and you grab your, right, 2 and 3 months worth of supply of toilet paper, because you never know for sure if you're going to get back to that grocery store again. They're going to have toilet paper again, right? So the industry had to kind of react to that a little bit, but they have. So it's really shouldn't be a supply issue on the supply side. It's really going to be more the pricing issue, right? So those things are going to cost a little bit more than we're used to seeing. And, you know, I hate using the phrase the new normal, but that's really where we are, right? People are used to seeing X product at 99 cents a pound or X product at $30 a case. Well, those new numbers are going to look a little bit different, and we're all going to have to adjust to that. So I don't think from a supply product availability perspective, there should be too many issues there. It'll be more price sensitivity.
Great. Well, let's shift for a second to an area where it is absolutely, at least in my opinion, the Wild West and going crazy. Is in the construction world and the commodity side of it. As I think I heard today one quote for one board of OSB wall board was over $100 when about, I don't know, Hugh, 2 months ago it was probably $10, $20, somewhere in that ballpark. So Hugh, just taking it on your end right now, this is our CapEx season time, right? This is when we're investing in our houses, we're doing renovations, we're remodeling. We've also had and seen a lot of pent up demand, if you will, for major construction projects, right? You know, this time last year, everybody was preserving cash, pulling projects, pausing. Now we're feeling a little bit more confident. Now we're wanting to start getting those things moving on our end. And as an industry, we're now competing with a society, if you will, that's been living in their houses and looking at the same 4 walls for 12 months. I mean, like, we really need to update this place. And now I've got some stimulus checks and a bigger tax return. And so now we're competing with more demand on top of, just like what Tony was outlining, labor shortage, everything else that the pandemic has created on the construction side as well. And that has certainly created the perfect storm, if you will, on many fronts for construction, unfortunately. And as we see it on our end, a hit to the wallet for our clients, and certainly trying to get stuff done in a timely manner has become more problematic. But I'm just curious of what insight you might be able to have, or what you're hearing from your standpoint related to the spikes, certainly in steel and wood, the glues, petroleum products in construction, all that, and what, if anything, guidance or advice that you would give us at this point.
Right. I mean, it's a real challenge in today's market, especially with steel and wood. Trying to get fabricators and subcontractors for erection of steel and things like that. The challenge today is that those steel fabricators, as part of their packages, they may have bar joist and deck and things that are really strained in the market right now. And those lead times, for example, a bar joist, have went from typically about an 8-week lead time through a manufacturer like Volcraft or someone like that, that their lead time is over 6 months now. And some of these manufacturers of bar joists and things like that have had such a strain because of the Amazon fulfillment centers across the nation, with over 100 of those being built now that are multi-million square foot facilities. They've committed themselves to that. And so they'll only guarantee their price for 15 days. And as a contractor and as an owner and a contractor trying to get together and close the deal, it's very hard for an owner to pull the trigger in the amount of time that it takes before that price is no longer good. And we face that challenge. We faced that challenge on several projects as of late. And the financing side and getting closed on a loan if it's not coming out of their own capital funds or whatever. Sometimes it's hard to ever get to the point where you can close that deal right now.
Yeah.
And,
well,
as far as projects, like projects for this summer, it's almost like if you don't have something closed and ready to go by now already, you've missed the boat this year, because if you're starting to plan now, you should have been planning back in February and getting all the things selected and closed and ordered, because the extended lead times on things, depending on what the project is, to be able to be successful to get that done now.
Yeah, and go ahead, Scott.
No, I just wanted to, as she was talking, I'm sitting here and I'm like, my eyes are bugging out of my head and I can't even believe some of the things I'm hearing him say. And Ivo chimes in the chat and says that a steel fabricator told his supplier earlier this week that he would only hold prices for 24 hours. So, wow, what a challenge. I mean,
and that speaks to the fact, and that was the point I was going to make, Scott, so great leadway, is that our biggest counsel to all of our clients right now, and I would tell everybody on this call, Hugh, you're exactly right. I mean, if you're trying to plan a summer project right now, good luck. It's going to be really difficult to get that done in a strong period of time. So making decisions and making them quick is critical, and it is challenging because we're trying to, whether we're working like with someone with Jen and closing a loan, or trying to get our cash in the right place. And some of our national organizations have asked us to take a very more conservative stance in trying to move quick. It can be difficult from our side of the equation, meaning the local house corporations. But in this, I think it's really important that people are not kidding when they tell you it's good for 24 hours. It's good for 12 hours. Was on a project call this afternoon, and one of their wood suppliers on framing said they will only honor for 12 hours because the market is changing that quickly right now. So with all that, before we start talking a little bit about money, this is a question I'd like both Tony and Hugh for you to ask or answer, I'm sorry. And it's always a tough one to try to answer, but just kind of curious, and I'll share a little bit about what we're hearing. But if you did have a crystal ball and could look into the future, and you look at the current state of things and the disruptions at hand, what would you say? I mean, timing of the market is always difficult, but in your expertise and vantage point, is this something that we're going to be trying to navigate for 12 months? Is it a 6-month blip? Is it something that is just trending to our new normal and where prices and things are going to rest? Do you have a thought on that in terms of a forecasting? And I'll start with you, Tony.
Yeah, so I'll go back to kind of what I've indicated about the USDA, right? So I do think, right, we're going to see a little bit more of the aggressive pricing here hit us over the next 6 to 9 months as some of these supply challenges shake out. Okay. And then those levels of pricing are going to become the new normal. And that's where I have to talk about. We have to think about that, right? I do think longer term, right, we'll see, food inflation settle back down to the 2 to 3% range and won't be pushing more of that 2.5 or 3.5%. But we're going to see the pricing impacts hit here over the next several months because manufacturers are still working through these challenges we talked about. Commodities are increasing. Labor costs are going up. The capacity they're able to put through their manufacturing facilities is reduced, which is going to create some challenges and some inventory imbalance. And until that settles a bit more, we're going to see some of those pricing pressures. But I do think this time next year, we'll have shaken out all of those. Those manufacturers that have exited certain product lines will be gone, and new manufacturers will have stepped in behind. And people like Brian, US Foods, Vizient, will have done the work to make sure that those products are now available to you at the most competitive rates available in the market. So, I do think it'll be a little unease here for a few months, but then we should settle back down.
Okay. So Hugh, I'm going to give you a real life conversation I was having today to kind of answer the question from your standpoint is that we're working on a project that's supposed to go next May, and we're in a debate right now whether we're going to go with wood framing or cold form steel, right? And right now the pricing for cold form steel is about a $200,000 savings versus wood, but they're also saying that could switch tomorrow. It's changing that much and that quickly. And of course, we're not going to have formal bid documents fully completed and vetted until October. So just, again, looking at your crystal ball, and what we have heard is that you're probably talking March or April of next year before you might see some more or less volatility, I should say, at least as it relates to wood and steel. And just curious, would you agree with that? And would you have any recommendations if you're trying to plan to start in May of 22? Is there any recommendations of how to navigate figuring out what your budget's ultimately going to end up with when you're really going to be going out for final pricing probably January or February of next year?
I'd want to tell you to stay with cold form steel because you're going to have a better product.
Right.
And have confidence that the market's gonna settle down. The crystal ball in that's really hard to say. Some of the challenges that I faced recently is on a new Greek project right now, the millwork price, that subcontractor that I've dealt with for 25 years could not hold his price on a project, and it's a $500 something thousand millwork package that he says, look, I can't do it. I need an increase of $45,000. Well, my decision was to hedge and not subcontract with that person right now. And because of the need for the millwork in the schedule and all, I hope that I can come back around the end of this summer and ask them to price it again. And lumber had come down, and had that same challenge on the cold form. My drywall subcontractor was getting hit with increases that they felt like that they would be able to overcome in the project, and they went on and accepted the subcontract on their portion of the work. I think that overall that cold form steel is going to come back down later on this summer. And I'm uncertain about lumber. And one reason is I'm hung out there with $45,000 that may double when I get around to it. I'm just having to take the chance.
Right. Yeah, and that's one of the working with a general contractor down in Texas. They shared the State Association of Contractors there put a report out, and their review of the market globally, if you will, related to the commodities and its relation to the construction market. They felt like you would start seeing some stability in the first quarter of next year. Might quiet down more toward the end of this year, but right now it's just kind of a rodeo that we're all having to face. So to this audience, it's just, again, it speaks to, again, stuff that we talk about quite a bit. Give yourself plenty of time, build in contingencies into your budgets as you're working through this, and just hang on, because it's going to be a ride. So let's, I know there may be some questions, Scott, and I'll open it up to them here in a second, but Jen, you've been very patient as we've talked through some of these challenges on the supply side and commodity side. Obviously, there was recent news. The Fed is holding rates steady for a period of time now. And, money, at least from what we're seeing, still remains or looks to be fairly competitive, and banks still appear to be interested in doing deals. So you mind sharing just kind of a broad overview right now of where things stand in the mortgage department or loan department for the industry?
Sure. Thanks, everybody for being on the call today. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. Thanks, Woody, and thanks, Scott. So you're absolutely right. Money is available. Rates are pretty much priced right now, starting out at anywhere between 4 and 4.5. 20-25 year amortization is very typical. I always try to push for 25. But what is happening, because the 10-year has gotten so high, is that banks are pricing deals off of the 5-year treasury, which is like half of the 10-year. So your rate is being repriced every 5 years versus 10 years. So you can get financed on very attractive rates, but just realize that that rate is not fixed for as long as we had experienced a year ago. The other issue that has been plaguing us is PPP. Lenders are doing deals, but they're taking longer to do because banks are so busy with their own customers doing PPP loans. And then when it was extended, that even put some more delays in. So money's out there, but getting these deals closed is taking some time. And appraisals. You bring up an excellent point, because steel and wood and other things are going up so much. It's still, you know, wood and steel. And even though it's more costly, you're not going to get the value because it costs more. So we are running into some issues with properties not appraising that are substantial rehabs or new construction. Whereas in the past, we may have looked at a 5% contingency. Now we're looking at a 10% contingency. And which just means that the deal, the loan amount needs to be a little bit higher. I can't stress enough going through value engineering and really looking at what you're spending money on. I've been working on a deal at Oklahoma State, and I just looked at them and said, why do we need to spend $700,000 on furniture when all the bedrooms are being built in? They're not buying separate beds and dressers and everything else. And they want these lovely living rooms and common areas, and that's great, but that doesn't add value to the house that or to the property, so that when it gets it's included in the valuation. So basically, we are having some challenges with appraised values on properties. Oftentimes too, when I start down the path, and I deal with house corporations typically for about 3 years in working on a deal, because I start usually at the same time that they're fundraising. People are scaling back, whereas they made a pledge of $100,000 or something. It's taking a little bit longer for that money to come in, but we need it in order to close the deal. So I can't stress enough staying on top of your donors, engaging the alumni, making sure they know what you're trying to do, communicate, share plans and specs, meet with them, call on them, whatever. All too often people fall off the radar, and I actually, believe it or not, talked to a donor for a house corporation just this week to just share, what the project has run into and what we're trying to work through, and just really appreciate their, looking at their pledge and everything. I was thrilled to hear that the woman did increase what she was going to do, and that's just because where we are right now with costs. And this is one where we have a shortfall right now, just because when we started and going through the contingency and everything else, we are hundreds of thousands of dollars short in finishing the project. And we have a guaranteed maximum price contract. We're having issues with the contractor. I mean, it's just, these times are just really challenging. And, alumni engagement is extremely important when you need to go back to them and say, hey, this is kind of where we are. Can you possibly help us out? I can't stress enough.
Oh,
Go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay,
Sorry.
I can't stress enough. What have we learned about COVID? And I hope what everyone has learned is your budget just has to be very thoughtfully constructed. I work with a couple of national housing entities, and they require, a set aside for capital needs, repairs. They just automatically build it. And it's wonderful when we run into situations where, like right now, we need some more money. We can't get any more loan. There's a little rainy day fund sitting there that we can pull from. That house is a business, and keeping occupancy up, making sure your budgets are thoughtfully constructed so that you're not going to be caught unawares when COVID hits and a health department says you've got to reduce your occupancy levels. That creates some real financial hardship. So, when times are good or when recruitment is going well, just be very, very thoughtful about your fees. I'm doing a couple of deals at Ohio State right now, and they had a huge recruitment, just gangbusters. It was wonderful. And so I just said to them, hey, let's look at our parlor fees, because now all of a sudden you have many, many more, new members, potential new members than you were planning on. So let's look at our parlor fees and, just leave them where they are. I know you have, now maybe 10 more people than you anticipated. You'd love to reduce them for everybody, but let's not be the low cost, house on campus. It's a business. We've got to have build reserves. We've got to be, competitive with the universities charging or local landlords or what have you. And I spend probably as much time going through budgets with house corporations and looking at their fees and, charging for parking or technology or, rent, yes. But many of these houses aren't increasing occupancy, which is good. But they need to, look at, especially if they've got, a couple of years of really good classes, we still need to build our reserves so that we're not caught unawares.
Jen, can I jump in just for a second? Sorry.
Yeah.
I want to ask a specific question. That's all great information, and thank you. I want to ask one just from I'm curious in that obviously this past 12 months was a abnormal year operationally for our houses, right? In terms of occupancy, increased expenses in certain areas where we probably weren't normally spending that much in terms of cleaning and sanitizing, all this other stuff. So how is the bank? So if I'm a house corporation today and I'm doing all these things that you're talking about, but I can't overcome the last 12 months, but I can show 3 years prior of history where we were reserving 10%, we were charging 90 to 95% what the university has. We have kicking off good cash, and we are forecasting that in 2021 to 2022, our campus is opening up a little bit more. We're not having to de-densify as much. We're getting back to a path of normal. Are banks working and willing to continue working with you and taking last year off as an anomaly, or are they penalizing, if you will, because of it?
So what's happening is that some of them are asking for a 6 to 12 month debt service reserve. And like I said, the rates right now, debt service loan payments are really are reasonable. I mean, they're really pretty low. So what a lot of lenders are doing is they're requiring a 6 to 12 month debt service reserve just to make sure, if the problem comes up, COVID too, that there's going to be some sort of reserve there that the lenders can count on. But no, you have to, when I do a pro forma, I look back 3 years and then I look forward 10. And to the extent that, again, that budget, I have to explain, and for every single deal that I did last year and even ones I'm doing now, 1920 and 2021 were all very challenging because of COVID and what was happening with health departments restricting occupancy levels. I've explained it, but I've also said, hey, look at what we were doing before. We absolutely could have afforded this loan.
Sure.
a couple of years ago. And our budget, we believe, is reasonable because this is, where the chapter levels are. Recruitment, fortunately, knock on wood, for a lot of the deals that I have done, recruitment has been very good, especially the NPC groups. But so
Yeah.
banks are taking it, but they also most of the time want some sort of a debt service reserve just in case. And we do put some covenants around that if we come back and have coverage ratios that exceed how what they were when it was underwritten, then it can roll off, which means that cash can be applied to the unpaid balance, typically is what they want to do. So that's what a lot of these lenders are doing. But they're actually, banks really want deals. I mean, they want good ones, but that's my job, to make these deals look as attractive as possible and convince loan officers and loan committees and that they want to do this deal. But right now the challenging part is property's just not appraising, and I just have gotten involved in the last couple of deals that I'm working on right now, and I'm just very, very worried that we're just not going to appraise because
the cost of the commodity,
the wood and everything else is just is being too expensive. So anyway.
Well, so as the audience has been listening, they could probably see I could have this conversation with all of you just all night long, and we could probably go on for 4 hours. It's just fascinating figuring out the market and the impact. And you're right, Jen, and what we do is, I mean, it is a business, and it's for outsiders looking in the fraternity and sorority world, I don't think they really recognize the amount of business, right? The valuation of our properties is in the billions of dollars, not the millions of dollars. The partners that we work with, like US Food, they are billion-dollar companies that are looking at our industry as $100, $200, $300 million contributor to their overall operations and what they do. Certainly from a construction standpoint, our little firm in 7 years has been over 150 million in just projects. So this is a massive industry, and I think it's very important for us to keep that in mind in terms of we are service organizations and we are here about the experience and the members, but certainly from a house corporation lens, it's thinking always from not always, but thinking from the standpoint and always remembering that there is a business element of this that we always have to keep an eye on. So with that, Scott, let's pause because I've got 40 different questions I could ask these folks this evening.
Well,
but
hey, Woody.
Yep.
Hey, Woody, the one thing I would add, Woods.
Yep.
Refinance. I mean, I would, rates are really low. Yes, I know you could run into a situation where you're repriced in 5 years. Absolutely. Talk to me about refinancing. I can't tell you how many deals I have done in the last 6 months where that's all I did and lowered, payments for groups, I mean, significantly. And that's, you may not want to do, any rehab at all at the property, but let's lower your payments, increase your net operating income so you can maybe, have some extra savings that, in a couple of months or 6 months or whatever, that you've got a nice nest egg and you don't have to get a loan or to do the repairs you want to do.
Great point. Scott, what questions we have?
Yeah, we've got a great one here from Debbie Friedman. She's saying, so the message we're hearing is cost is becoming more of a barrier and we need to look at how to lower cost. I'm concerned out of house fees, parlor fees will be one of the first things cut. Many of their members, she says, haven't even stepped foot in the house since COVID. So how do we balance all of that?
Oof. Debbie's coming out with a hard one right there.
Yes, she did.
That's a great, great question. Jen, you got a thought on that while I ponder it myself? What you see with your clients?
I have to tell you, the groups that I've worked with over the course of the last, many months, the houses aren't empty. They are not empty. Yes, they've had to reduce their occupancy, but I have gotten from them their COVID plan. So how they're, sanitizing, cleaning, whatever they have done regarding, how many people they're feeding or feeding them in shifts or whatever. They still are recruiting, and they may not be recruiting in the house, but they are using the house for some activities. It's a balancing act as far as, your parlor fees. You would like to have, you have to look at how many folks are going to rent versus how many, the chapter size and the percentages. And what I find is if you go higher than 25 or 30%, living in the house, you're really stretching the sustainability of your rental income. And I talk to a lot of groups about, let's not increase your occupancy. Let's look at, what's your chapter numbers and what you're hoping to recruit, what you have historically been, and then look at, and the campus too. Is it a campus where very few groups are housed? Is the house, attracting a lot of members to your organization? But we spend a lot of time in strategy about what makes a lot of sense for how much of your rental income, what percentage of rental income is of your total income, so that we can, make sure that we can sustain that revenue stream, and then look at what we can qualify for. I will also say that a number of groups, house corporations, are having the chapters pay for utilities. It's not a huge number, but a huge number from a dollar standpoint, but it really makes the chapter mindful of turning off the lights and maybe not having it 65 degrees in the summer and 85 degrees in the winter. Getting the chapter more engaged in the financial viability of the house. And food is another thing. I can't tell you how many, let's sit back and look at what your meal plan is. Are you requiring everybody to live at the house? Those are the types of things we just get back to. We talk about different vendors, and there's some vendors that are just great for say 40, 45 or more eating at the house versus smaller numbers. So that's where we try to really look at what is working at the house right now, and then just come up with a budget plan that's as thoughtful as we can make it.
Debbie, sorry, Scott, what?
No, go ahead. I want to add something after you finish.
Yeah, so I think I tend in these situations, Debbie, to simplify it quite a bit, right? Because our out-of-house members, it's always the debate is, well, I don't come by the house, and where's the value, and what am I getting for my out-of-house fees? Yep. And so a lot of times in the conversations that we're having is, as Jen pointed out, and so what value can we provide in terms of food services? One way certainly to attract them to the house and give them some value, and making sure, one, there's a lot of organic benefits to that, as I know that in the many years that you've been doing this, and it's a volunteer, but there's a lot of benefits, and that's why we want them to be coming to the house and getting creative on that. But at the same time, the reality of it is, as a house corporation, our expenses are pretty much set. There's not a lot of variability, especially on the women's side of the equation. They are what they are. And what we find, and it's very difficult because unfortunately as an industry, we've perpetuated this really in the last, probably 10 to 15 years, we've seen more of this, some of it because the market has shifted and we've had to, but at the same time, we just haven't had the time to build into the members like we want, in terms of the ownership factor, into the fact that we have these expenses. If we want this house, we have to support it. And we have to have those conversations with the undergraduate women. And I know it's pretty difficult now. It's like, well, they're not, or the members, sometimes we automatically go to the fact, well, they're not going to engage in those conversations or look at it as really just a dollar and cents scenario. And what we find, you've got to really sit down as an organization, as a chapter, and saying, hey, if we want to have this facility, this is what the costs are, and we need to think through the equitable piece of it, because we can't necessarily put the whole burden on those that are living in. And we have to be, and rightly so, mindful of the fact that of those who are living out, what's the value they're getting. But overall, we can't lose sight of the fact of we have this much money going out, and we got to make sure we have that much coming in to support it. Scott, you had a thought?
Yeah, I just a few, and I don't have an answer to the question, but I do want to kind of validate the question and maybe give the audience a couple of things to think about. 'Cause I think Debbie asked a wonderful question, and that we've got to determine as an industry, is our experience financially accessible? Whether you're AE Phi or Beta Theta Pi or who knows whatever your letters are. I was at a conference a couple of years ago, and the speaker, and I need to go back and make sure I heard this right, because it about knocked me over. He said 50%, for the first time in the nation's history, over 50% of incoming students have spent some time in poverty growing up. So we've got half of our market might not even be able to afford our experience if we don't start to do things a little bit differently. And one of the discussions I really loved last week, and I think Debbie was on this call too. We attended the virtual conference for MJ Housing Forum last week, and one of the conversations was about reimagining housing. And so some of the conversations were, okay, how are we reimagining how are meeting students' needs? Are we doing things for mental health and wellness? Are we doing things to meet their academic needs? Or are we spending money where we don't need to spend it? The other thing we talked about, or that was discussed last week, was getting flexible with agreements. You got students studying abroad. Is there is there almost a motel, hotel kind of agreement that you can that you need to make part of your menu? So all of those things I think are really, really important to think about. And for those of you who were able to attend MJ's conference last week, I'd love to go back and rediscuss some of those creative ways that they were reimagining just the agreements part of the experience to make it more financially accessible. And so you're not locking somebody in for a long-term agreement when they really only need the place for a little while. And I guess the other thing I want to just challenge the group on, and this is one of the things that Jen touched on a second ago, is are we more focused on chandeliers or meeting students' needs? And so when we talk about where's the right place to invest our money, I love that we have these wonderful homes, but I wonder what's more important? Is it having really state-of-the-art learning space more important or less important than the $500,000 chandelier you've got hanging in the foyer when you walk in the front door? So I guess I would just really challenge our group on the call here is to let's make sure we're keeping the main things. And because if we are, then those students who don't come back to the house, if we are keeping the main things, then the students who don't live in, they're going to come back to the house because they're going to have needs met. But if they're not having needs met, then why would they come back to the house? And if they're not coming back to the house, why would they pay those out-of-house fees? So those are just really hard conversations I think we have to have internally and as a community to make sure that is the experience financially accessible, and is it one that has extraordinary value? So
yeah, and to just kind of piggyback off this, Tony, I'd love to get your thought again, thinking practical strategies, right? Because Debbie's question and what is asked is a tough one. Like that, I mean, we could contemplate this on a lot of different ways. Whether it's value, can we get creative related to our revenue stream and technology fees and all these other different elements that go into it, or how do we make it more cost effective? And one of the things, as if we're thinking about cost and being cost effective and managing, which is obviously why you partner with groups like Brian's and Culinary Consultants, and creating a little bit more predictability and leveraging that buying power. I mean, you've been doing this a while, and you work with a behemoth of a company that's out there trying to leverage buying power for your customers every day. Do you have any recommendations or just best practices as a house corporation, which may have some of these budgets are 200,000 or 300,000 in expenses. Some of them are north of $1 million in terms of expenses every year. One or two points that you may offer them as they're developing their budgets and trying to manage expenses that we may not be thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll go back to the menu flexibility. There's always some opportunities to flex in certain items, flex out others, maybe go to more cost-effective products. You can certainly look at products that maybe are a little bit further down the value-added channel, so you pay a little bit more for the product up front, but maybe a little bit less cost to serve or prep the product. You kind of have to look at all those kinds of things, right? Certainly, food waste is an element to look at. Various studies talk about the amount of wasted food, right? Whether it's from home, from a restaurant, from a student feeding operation. So really look critically at some of those steps as well. It's tough, critical balance, right? Because you have to give the students the right kind of experience, right? And food is a big part of the experience. Feeds the brain, feeds the body. But maybe a little more flexibility with the menu. You can find a few pennies here and there.
Hugh, question to you. In thinking through, as I know we're coming up on our time, and I want to be very mindful and respectful of everyone's time on this, is that right now there's a lot of conversations. When we talk about the industry, the last couple of sessions, we've pointed out that the fraternity and sorority world in of itself, because of the pandemic, because of just the population numbers of folks coming into higher education over the next 5 to 7 years is going to be down. So enrollment's going to be down. We've come out of some of the most extraordinary growth that we've seen in over a decade. So, I look in talking with counterparts and industry experts and stuff, you kind of have a sense that the fraternity and sorority world is what I would say is a little bit in a bear market. But everything in the outside world feels very much obviously a bull market, and everybody's kind of wondering when's that next crash going to be, so to speak. But I'm just curious, as someone who has been a part of many fraternity and sorority projects, and as you're forecasting for your company right now and what you have in the pipeline, how do you see construction for fraternity and sorority industry over the next 3 to 5 years? Are you guys bullish about it? You think it's slowing down? You think it's will remain steady, and has it remained steady? Just at a 30,000 foot view, I'm just really curious as your company, as you look at our segment, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to what was being said there and having opposite thoughts in my mind about, I may be in a sheltered region here, but, what I've seen, Greek work is a small part of what we do overall, but in that arena, like, it's very competitive. It's like, the next project wants to be larger and better than the project that I did before, and it seems to be increased in the area that I'm working, and they want better serveries, the ability to serve more food, the larger houses to get the girls or boys there, during the day. The place is full and everybody's studying there and using it and it's doing what it's supposed to do. I've seen the opposite of probably what's going on in other regions that I'm not aware of. And so, like at Ole Miss, where we're working now, there's a chain of projects that's because once somebody does that new house or that large expansion, everybody feels like they've got to compete. And I've not dealt with a house core ever that didn't feel like they had to compete and have bigger and better. That's just from our region.
Great. So, Scott, before we start kind of summarizing what we've learned tonight and what we've done the last two sessions for everyone, are there any other questions that are there? And I'm going to do a little summary and ask each one of our panelists to either confirm my summary or tell us where we're wrong as we try to put a bow on this.
Perfect. No more questions. We're good to go. So please summarize away. I'm eager to hear how you wrap this up.
Yeah. So, I think again, this whole series has been about getting back on offense, right? And many of you that are on this call, we know quite well, and you've been doing this as long as we have, if not longer in many respects, just dedicated to serving the community. And we certainly understand that. But our goal is to get back on offense. And when we look at different things we've talked about, we've got to focus on what we can control. As we look at, we thought coming into 2021, we might see some return to normal. We might see some less political unrest. We may see hopefully more steady pricing. And it just seems like we went from one chaotic year to what is becoming another chaotic year, but in a whole different way. And so at the end of the day, we always need to be operating from a standpoint of focusing on what we can control, trying to minimize the noise that's out there, and really look to the experience that our members are having and the value that we're trying to provide them. And if we look at the three areas that we've talked about tonight, which are big components to what we do day in and day out financially and how we operate our facilities, and what we're seeing now going into the fall in supply chain and what Tony and our friends and Brian at Culinary Consultants are telling us is that the disruptions that we were very fearful of last year, some came to fruition, others did not. And by and large, I think we all got through and none of us ran out of toilet paper. People had hand sanitizer. We had cleaning products and all those different things. So knock on wood, it didn't manifest to what many of us were feeling. But when we look at the supply chain moving forward, it is supplies will be there. They may be a little slow in certain segments, and understand that pricing is going up. And the normal 2 to 3% that we see, we're probably a year, if not a little longer out before we see that normal type of increase. Next 12 months, we're going to see a little bit steeper, maybe 1 or 2% on top of that before it starts leveling out. But the good news is that the industry has responded and continues to respond. I think it speaks volumes to, again, as you look at ways, as Debbie talks about in terms of and Scott brings out a very good point, we want to make an affordable scenario for our members, and we don't want money to be a barrier to joining us. So we need to be looking at not just revenue, but our expense side, and looking at group purchasing, looking at negotiating our contracts with our mechanical contractors and our pest control and everything else that's out there. I can't tell you how many times still to this day when we bring on a new client and there's legacy bills that are out there, cable boxes that you cannot find that they're still paying for. Just those different things, we need to have the discipline on that and look at everything we can from the expense side. So better news on supplies, but costs are going to be spiking a little bit more than we care to see. On the construction front, again, you heard me say early on, it's the Wild West right now. Everything we're hearing and seeing is that it's going to be the first quarter of next year before the market can truly catch up or react to what is going on right now. It speaks volumes to the fact of always continue to be looking at your numbers, always have a contingency, always give yourself as much time as you can possibly, and make sure that you're looking at all angles, both from the fundraising standpoint, to the financing standpoint, like with our friends at Residential Capital Corp, and all those different elements that go to how we fund it with our reserves, and doing the business side of things to make sure we're as successful as we can with that project. We oftentimes, we are, to what Hugh was alluding to, we do react. We have a neighbor that builds and they start the next boom on that campus. And what we see sometimes is when we're making decisions on our projects, we're doing it from a position of emotion and not from a position of business. And so we are passionate about our houses. We are passionate about our chapter. We want to be competitive and we want to be right there at the top on our campuses, but we can't do that at the financial detriment of the chapter as a whole, or we won't be around. So I always encourage you guys, especially right now as you're working through a very volatile construction market, just because this house went up and you feel like you got to go this year, if you can pause and maybe look and go next year because your dollars just came in or your budget just came in 30 to 40% higher than anticipated, instead of just rolling the dice and going with it, maybe you need to pause. Timing the construction market is very dangerous at times and difficult to do. But at the same time, you need to be making decisions based on what the numbers tell you, not necessarily what our heart is really wanting to see. And then lastly, on the financial piece, certainly at this time, in day and age, it is still some of the most favorable financing out there for fraternities and sororities, and banks are interested in the business. This is a market that has proven time and again, it is a very good lending market, disciplined market when we're doing things right. Now, we certainly have many house corporations out there that aren't running like a business, and we need to be getting there sooner versus than later, having good records, running monthly reports, working from a budget, looking at how we charge fees, looking at our expenses, building that 10% of revenue reserves, or at least 2% of the value of your house, doing the capital expenditure planning, looking at it as a continuous basis, right? All these disciplines that we know, that makes your job a lot easier. When you go out to fundraise, when your alums with deep pockets see that you're running a very efficient financial model, that gives them confidence. It makes Jen's job a lot easier when she's going out to banks and saying, look at this 3-year track record here, look at their occupancy number, look at their chapter numbers. All that bodes well for us. And it's not hard. It just takes some time and it takes some discipline on that piece. And I would say by and large, especially right now, and Debbie, your question was fantastic tonight, so I thank you for it, especially right now when we're talking about an industry that is sensitive to membership and sensitive to cost and everything else. You need to be having conversations at an appropriate level with your chapter. Build them into the process. They're going to support what they help create, as Scott always talks about. So do that in the financial side of things. Talk openly about it and as transparent as possible where it is appropriate to do so. And I think all of those matters. If we can hit on these, we're going to be just fine, and we're certainly going to find ourselves much better on the offensive side of the equation versus defense moving forward. So I will we are just a little bit past our 75 minutes, so just real quick, Tony or Jen or Hugh, did I miss anything, misrepresent anything, or do you have anything you'd have to add to that summary?
Nope, it's good from my standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, anytime an owner is contracting and doing capital projects and all, use their time wisely on the front end, get inside the project, make sure that because they typically have interior designers also, make sure that they understand the project and how they contract with a contractor don't leave any open book. Get a cost of the work plus a fee with the GMP or a lump sum. Don't leave themselves open to exposure in our market today.
Great point.
Yeah.
Tony, anything on your end?
It summarized very nicely. I would say the one thing, again, challenge the chef to work with the U.S. Foods account executive to make sure they're truly getting the maximum value out of the contracts that have been so aggressively put in place on your behalf. So really make sure that you're taking full advantage, being fully compliant to the contracts that are out there, and saving every dollar possible.
Great. Scott, I'll turn it over to you. And before I do that, thank you again, Tony and Jen and Hugh, for your time tonight and being with us and sharing your expertise. We can't thank you enough. And we appreciate everything that you guys do every day in support of the fraternity and sorority community very much.
Wait, can I mention something?
Sure.
I think what's important too is to utilize if you're outsourcing your food program to a chef management company, they're most likely, whether who they are, they're tied to a GPO, which means a group purchasing organization like a Vizient or a Premier or a Hipsy or whomever. They have a lot of contracts outside of just food that you can utilize. And there's, pest control, there's everything that you could probably use. And CSL, I guarantee, is the one point of contact where you can go to and say, hey, we need this and we need this, and they'll reach out to the right people. And I think that you got to really focus on making sure that the Greek community is coming together as a whole, and these group purchasing organizations now are starting to pay attention. And it's a big industry now, and with people like CSL, people like US Foods, and people like Culinary Consultants, we're all trying to bring that buying power together. So don't be afraid to ask questions and use the resources that you have, because you're not just a single organization. You're an entire Greek community right now when it comes to the suppliers.
Great point.
Nailed it.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Brian. Perfect comment to wrap us up there. So yeah, one more thanks to all the panelists, to Jen, to Hugh, to Brian, to Tony. Can't tell you guys how much we appreciate you being with us tonight, and to Woody for facilitating a great conversation. Man, if I had a nickel for every time my jaw hit the floor tonight, I would be a really wealthy man, and I could fund all of your housing currently. So just an incredible conversation. A great wrap up to a wonderful 3 weeks, three session series. And I just appreciate you guys all making time to be with us tonight and for the other 2 sessions. So if you missed the first 2 sessions, they are available online. So would encourage you to go check that out. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. We can get you that information as well. So one final plug is we're talking about where to invest. We think it's really important to invest in your house directors. If you want to know more about the Fraternal House Directors Conference that's coming up this summer, fraternity and sorority house directors, we would love for you to go to csladvance.com/conference and check out what we've got planned for this summer. So with that being said, I will say thank you again to everybody for joining. If you have any questions, again, their contact information is on the screen. You can also stay in touch with us via social media or online. Our central office phone number is there on the board as well. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time on House and Home. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Very good.